Malaysia, police department is called as the Royal Malaysian Police (RMP), which is an entity that is responsible for the security and the safety of the country of Malaysia. The headquarters of RMP is located at Bukit Aman, Kuala Lumpur. Before the establishment of RMP on 25th March 1807, Malaysia has started the modern police organization after being allowed by the Charter of Justice in Penang. During the era, the organization is only limited to their respective states only. Later on, after the World War II, the Civil Affairs Police Force was established and the formation of the entity was formed by the H.P. Longworthy.
Moving on to the first issue, which is corruption. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, corruption can be defined as improper and usually unlawful conduct intended to secure a benefit for oneself or another. Corruption may involve profit or another type of material benefit gained illegally. The typical form of corruption includes bribery, extortion, receiving or fencing stolen goods, and selling drugs. Recently, the news on the corruption that occurred within the police force has been brought to light. In Inspector General of Police, Tan Sri Abdul Hamid Pado's recent statement alleging a serious corruption and abuse of power among the police force, including the existence of cartel in the Royal Malaysian Police (BRM), involved intending to dominate the force for their own benefit. The factor that contributed to the corruption that occurred among the police officers is because they are said to be underpaid, in contrast to their power. The Malaysian police officer in 2015 with secondary education qualification are being paid barely above the minimum wage of 1,000 ringgit. Meanwhile, the diploma holder earn a minimum of 1,711 ringgit monthly, and the degree level holder earn a minimum of 2,329 ringgit monthly upon entering the PDRM as inspector. Compared to the police officer in Singapore, for secondary education qualification holder, they are being paid a minimum of 5,686 ringgit monthly. Meanwhile, the degree level holder earn a minimum of 10,623 ringgit monthly. So we can see there is a huge difference and contrast between the wages of the police officer from the both of these countries. Earning such low salaries will result, especially those in the lower ranks of police officers, to receive bribes, as the pay are low and it is not enough to cover their cost of living, as the living expenses these days are quite expensive. Therefore, by earning a respectable wage, will hinder the PDRM officer from soliciting bribes, whether for petty traffic offences or a large-scale organized crime syndicate.
Corruption among police can impact the economy of Malaysia. In 2017, Malaysia has lost about 46.9 billion ringgit Malaysia due to corruption, in which the amount of money can be equal to 117,250 prima houses that cost about 400,000 ringgit Malaysia per unit. High corruption cases can affect the economic growth of Malaysia, as the investor will not invest their money to the country because of high risk. This is because the gross domestic profit (GDP) and government expenditure will decline about 1.96% and 0.3% respectively, which can give huge impact towards the economy. The people of the country who are in the bottom and middle class will be affected the most, as they cannot uplift their living standard. In addition, the imbalance between the rich and the poor will become larger, as the poor will suffer because of misallocation resources.
Moving on to the next issue, police brutality. Police brutality can be defined as various human rights violations by police. This might include beatings, racial abuse, unlawful killings, torture, or indiscriminate use of riot control agents at protests. Recently, the cases of police brutality in Malaysia have been brought to light as the news of the death of Kaul McTrader, A. Ganapati in police custody, and this has caused an uproar to the social media user throughout Malaysia, as the trending of #Justice for Ganapati and #Brutality in Malaysia. Many police brutality cases have also occurred before this, such as the case of S. Mahendran in May 2019, who was falsely arrested and held in custody on suspicion of an armed robbery and was tortured for it. Between 2002 and 2016, there were 257 deaths in police custody, but the number of cases officially recorded was as low as 62. According to the human rights organization Suara Rakyat Malaysia, this leads to just 1 out of every 4 incidents of death in police custody receiving media coverage, while the others get unnoticed by everyone other than the victims' families. In countries with high rates of police brutality, a combination of factors such as weak legislation, racial or other types of discrimination, instability or conflict, and ingrained impunity is common. This can be seen in the case of S. Mahendran, who got abused by a police officer. The same police headquarters that abused Mahendran led the internal investigation against their own officers for the alleged assault. Without a proper independent body overseeing such cases of police violence, guilty officers will most likely just receive light reprehension and in the end escape scot-free despite their acts of brutality. Thus, the lack of accountability within the fraternity has developed and molded a culture where officers unscrupulously behave and act above the law, as shown in the case of Mahendran.
Of police brutality is that it can cause emotional and physiological effects on individuals and communities. Experiencing physical harassments and death that go unpunished can be really stressful to the victims and the communities. This is because it might bring out the memories of the action done to them and can bring about collective anger, grief, and helplessness. The character of loved ones after the police have killed or abused them can also be excruciating, eliciting more negative emotions. This emotion might be damaging to individual mental health and might boost distress at the population level. This will be a danger to our health because it will tear and wear on the body organs, which may lead to conditions such as diabetes, strokes, ulcers, accelerating aging, and even death itself. Although there is no one yet who has such condition due to police brutality in Malaysia except for the traumatizing experience and death, but if it keeps happening, then such condition may be happen soon.
Abuse of power can be defined as the misuse of the authority vested in a person or an official for personal advantage, which result in adverse effect and breeds negativity. The phenomenon abuse of power in workplace are not stranger among the employee in all types of organization and occupation. This act will give very bad impact to employees, especially in mental and physical. Abusing of power is not targeted at the high level of management, such as supervisor, manager, and the entire unit or department only, but it also attacks the individual at the lower level. Recently, issues related to abuse of power among the police in Malaysia have been hotly debated. Malay Mail online newspaper reported that the Inspector General of Police, Tan Sri Abdul Hamid Bado, will detect and expose people with the title of Datuk Seri who abuse his power for political gain. The people abuse his power through police department and believed to be special branch for his political purpose. There are many factors that cause abuse of power among employees in Malaysia. One of the factors is person act in a manner that manipulate an area of control for personal gain to avoid basic managerial responsibility. People act like that because they desperate to own something such as money. Based on the opinion of Inspector General of Police Tan Sri Abdul Hamid Bado, they would minimize acts of corruption and abuse of power among them by raising the salary of lower rank of the police. This is because the cost living, especially for those stationed in the cities, was very high and the salary earned by the police is low and not enough, which may lead them to abuse their power.
If a police decided to misuse his power, the public will lose their trust not only towards the police who committed the action, but also to the whole department, and they might receive hate and lack of trust. The wrongful actions that were made will downgrade the integrity values that they had. A phrase, "if we cannot trust the police, who can we trust?" enhancing on how much public put their trust towards the police department. Hence, the people will live in fear if the state authority perpetrated such action because the entity that they trust is not using their power rightfully and afraid that the police might hurt them or threaten them.
The solution for underpay is that the government needs to consider increasing the forces budgets and the officers' salaries and providing them with good infrastructure and facilities. So far, the government has approved the construction of 2,000 units of house in the Klang Valley for personnel and 5,000 more units at the final stage of discussion pending approval from federal agencies. The government has also spent a large amount of funds to repair all residential units. To improve the weak legislation in the police department needs to make the investigation transparency. The Inspector General of Police should issue a standing order that instructs police stations across Malaysia to fully cooperate with external oversight agencies investigating police conduct by providing access to police files, police witnesses and other requests for evidence. As for the issue of police abuse of power for personal gain, the police department in Malaysia should establish a tracking system for police officers facing civilian complaints of abuse of power or misconduct, including those that have been sued for severe damage or in order to identify officers who misuse their power. The tracking system should be used to make sure that the problem officers are properly investigated and disciplined. And when they are convicted of crimes, they should be dismissed from the police force.